In the past decade, the advertising world has been taken over by a shift in mindset. To best describe the change in expectations, I'll borrow the lyrics of Kanye West. In a digital-first world, clients want campaigns to be working harder, better, faster, stronger. Antiquated processes and lackluster results can't be explained away with robust storytelling. Clients want it all: strategic concepts, smart budget allocation, flawless execution, and metrics that prove out ROI in ways worthy of getting written up in the trades. Shawn Riegsecker predicted big shifts back in 2001 when he decided to start his ad tech software company, Centro. And he didn't think new expectations would only impact major holding companies, but advertisers of all shapes and sizes. I am pleased to be joined today by the founder and CEO of Centro, Shawn Riegsecker. He founded the ad tech software company back in 2001, and he spent nearly the last 2 decades identifying solutions to mitigate some of the complexities associated with the media buying and planning process. Today, we'll be discussing how digital transformation and the economy are having a direct impact on the advertising landscape. So let's get started on our very first episode of AdTech Unfiltered.
I want to start off talking about the layoffs plaguing the digital publishing industry today. Vice announced that they're laying off 10% of their global workforce. McClatchy is doing buyouts for employees. Over 450 employees have been offered those. BuzzFeed is going through another round of layoffs. Mike, Vox, Gannett, unfortunately, the list goes on and on. So I think the broad and sweeping assumption that we can make is that, there's been an inability to hit financial targets. What do you see as going on here, and why has there been such a tumultuous impact on the publishing industry?
Yeah, so it's a super interesting time right now. And I think I would draw distinctions between different types of companies. So you've got the historical, traditional web, or I should say print-based publishing units, which you talked about. And then we're talking about the digital native startups like the Vox and the BuzzFeed and everything there. I think that the story relative to print is just incredibly well chronicled. There's huge infrastructure, there's huge fixed costs that those guys have to cover in order to just get a newspaper or a magazine out or something along those lines. And I think we've just seen that the dollars are shifting from print primarily because readers are moving more to getting their content from the web. That's very down the middle of the fairway. We understand that. But then if you move to the heavily venture capital backed, private equity backed, digital native publishers, what we're seeing here is that it's on many levels a very tried and true statement that they need the VC money and they need the PE money in order to actually build out the content management systems. They've got to build out the editorial teams. They have to build out all of the various departments that surround it. But those guys started growing up at the same time that the social ad networks or the social media companies, and then specifically the search companies and Google primarily, is that when 70 to 80% of every new dollar that goes into this industry is being funneled to the duopoly today, we've got just an infrastructure problem with where the money's going and where those monies are being accounted to. And so I don't think that the downsizing of the digital publishers is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just a right sizing of the overall market relative to there was a lot of money that needed to be invested to get them to the place it was. They're great brands, they've got great followings, they've got loyal audiences. But it's going to take them time to figure out exactly what the business model is relative to the social networks and the search companies picking up a lot of those dollars. And I don't think people have figured it out yet.
So I want to switch the conversation a little bit from the publishing side to the impact it has for media buyers who have looked to some of the publications we just mentioned and just larger media entities as part of their buying processes. How do you see these shifts having an impact on advertisers and marketers and their approach on media buying?
So Nora, I'm not sure I'd say there's a true connection between how the shifts in the publishing world are actually affecting the digital media buying process. What I think is that technology has just driven a fundamental shift across the board, where no longer do I have to pay a very specific publisher to reach a certain audience. I don't have to pay a certain CPM because on many levels there's almost unlimited inventory that that exists in our industry that also is what allowed RTB to take place. What I see more is that when we move from people-based buying to technology-based buying, and where the computers and the algorithms are making the decisions, and the computers and the algorithms are determining what price to bid on a per impression basis, it actually moves the power away from the sellers, which historically had a lot of power. The broadcast networks, the print publications, you had to go through them as a proxy to reach certain audiences. It has totally been capsized today. So today, when I can pretty much find whatever audience I need to, and the algorithms can determine what price I need to buy that specific audience at, the power has shifted completely to the hands of the actual buyers, and specifically the platforms that the buyers are using. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change. So on many levels, it's really going to be, from a publishing perspective, about creating the right brand, engaging with the right audiences, and then figuring out a way to understand yield optimization as scientifically as you possibly can, and then choosing how do you want to actually allow the platforms to access your inventory. Do you want to hold some of it back? Do you want to allow direct sales? Do you want to create more private deals and programmatic marketplace opportunities for folks? But it's a really just hard industry today from a sales and publishing standpoint, when the power and the buying power sits in the hands of the platforms and the agencies today.
What do you think automation is going to do as far as transforming the digital buying and programmatic buying landscape in 2019 and beyond?
If anything, I'm more shocked that we're not talking about automation in this industry at all, or anywhere close to enough of what we need to. It's, when I go to conferences or I do podcasts or I do interviews, everyone wants to talk about what's the new technology coming out, or what's the new audience-based approach that people can take to, more micro define and target people. Yet if you look at the industry at a macro level and you take a look at what's unhealthy about this industry, I come back to this industry at every single conference, any single networking event, the number one topic we should be talking about is automation. So we go back 20 years, digital was very hard, it was fragmented, it was really complex. Shift 20 years later, it's harder, it's more complex, and it's more fragmented than it's ever been. And then a lot of people try to conflate the word programmatic and real-time bidding with automation. Look, programmatic advertising has not automated anything in this industry. It's actually created more complexity than we had before it existed. And that means that it's required more talent, more people, more work, more platforms, more integrations than we've ever had to deal with before. Now, that as a backdrop is happening at the same time that clients are taking a hard look at what they're spending with their agencies, whether that's creative or even specifically media agencies, and they're attempting to suppress the amount of investment they're making with these external agencies. So at a time we actually have, on one level, complexity and fragmentation increasing. At the same time, we've got clients willing to pay less and less. It's an untenable situation that we have in our industry today. The only way for this industry to get out from underneath the pressures and to create a healthy, high gross margin-based business, if you're an ad agency, is to look at automation. And today, when you have the average media strategist logging into 5 to 7 different platforms just to do their job, okay, when you actually have the same hierarchical pyramid structure, there's a few people at the top and then a lot of junior media associates at the bottom, and those media associates are spending their entire day pulling data from different platforms, putting the data together, creating a lot of spreadsheets. We don't have automated financial reconciliation. We don't have automated client reporting. It's an absolute mess. And so, when I look at the future of this industry, software is going to have to come in like it has in other industries. We're going to have to automate the low-level, non-value creative tasks that people are doing. We're going to have to get the people in our industry focused on higher-level knowledge-based types of work and services. And in order to do so, what you're going to see is that the actual head count, specifically in the media buying agency world, will need to be reduced in order to allow the agencies to create the right profit margin that the Wall Street and the investors are going to be looking for at the time that clients are either going to take their media buying practices in-house or they're just going to be choosing to pay their agencies less. So we've really got just two trend lines that are going in the opposite direction, and the only way we're going to create a healthier industry is through some level of comprehensive software automation across the board.
You spoke in detail about the importances of creating these automated processes and that it's absolutely more essential today than it ever has been before. But I think there needs to also be conversation around willfulness for agencies to adopt these types of systems, because I was a young media associate once upon a time working in a big holding company, and I don't know if there was going to necessarily be that receptivity if people at the bottom were doing some hand raising saying how painful it was for them. So do you think that there is greater receptivity in 2019 than there has been historically?
So there's a phrase in the world that says that necessity is the mother of all invention. And I even equate that pain, when you experience it, requires you to come up with different solutions than what you had before. And so there's no question to me that when I sit with agency executives, there is now for the first time a true meaningful discussion on, I recognize for the first time the need to start automating my business and to creating greater productivity in my current workforce that I have. Now, if you look at, 10 years ago, agency employees have always worked very hard. It's always been something that's happened inside of the industry. But at the same time, clients were willing to pay for that. And then you look at when programmatic came into play, and we talked about the fragmentation and complexity it created. It was fine because we had external trading desks, we had external companies, whether third-party vendors that the agencies were using or their own owned and operated trade desks. They had the ability to actually take a margin on the media, which funded those heads. 3 to 4 years ago, when the A&A came out with the K2 report and the consultancy, it has really closed down the ability for media buying firms to take undisclosed margins from the programmatic dollars. So now, if those dollars are gone, we can't fund the extra bodies that we need. Clients aren't willing to pay for those extra bodies. The only way out is going to be through some level of automation. And so I just believe that right now, at this exact moment, everyone through pain and through necessity is saying, what are we going to do? And the only way they're going to figure it out is through some level of greater productivity, labor cost savings, and it's going to happen through automation.
So I can appreciate the fact that you mentioned that there's both pain and necessity that's going to require agencies and other media buying bodies to adjust their current processes and maybe do it sooner rather than later. But I think there's also anxiety around the thought of creating too many automated processes when we currently have buyers that have a scope of work that's defined, and then this is going to eliminate some of those otherwise existing opportunities and ways that we currently work. So my question for you is, from a standpoint of automation, what is the balance between creating automation and still having that human touch?
You always get this fear that software is going to somehow come and displace everyone in this industry. The reality is, it's not going to happen overnight. But at the same time, we have to be realistic. Okay, software is eating the world. Okay, software is going to be automating a lot of the work that people in this industry do. And if I'm sitting there counseling any person who's starting their career, I would say make sure that you are understanding ahead of time what's the things that you do every day that a computer is going to be able to do just as good, if not better. And my advice is to make sure that you keep moving yourself into knowledge-based places inside the organization. It means, are you really great at servicing your customers? Are you great at being in business development and bringing in customers? Are you really great at understanding data science? Are you really great at understanding holistic research? And those are going to be the spots that are always going to be available overall. Or if you're not necessarily working in a media buying capacity, there's going to be a lot of enterprise software companies out there that are going to need people who are really great at customer service or at actually doing, demos on software and automated software and AI-based and machine learning-based software. So I don't think there's going to be a lack of things to do in and around marketing and in and around advertising. But if you are young in this industry, just really make sure you're scoping a path for you in line with what are the major trends going on. Because for anyone to sit here and think that software isn't going to allow for a reduction in certain types of jobs, roles, and activities, then you're just kidding yourself and you're fooling yourself relative to your future or the security of a specific job going forward.
I have what came first, the chicken or the egg scenario type question for you. Is it automation technology that is going to change and shape the way that marketers change their expectations for the way that digital media buying fulfills their marketing needs and their media needs? Or is it the fact that marketers had already desired changes in the way that they were working with media agencies and media buying organizations that has necessitated the development of automated processes?
I'm not sure it's actually either one of those, or if it is, it's a combination of both of them, but with other third things coming in. So I don't think it's necessary the brands are sitting around saying our agencies need to automate themselves better, because if you look at the idea that the contracts are based upon headcount, it is the most ridiculous way to price ad agency services. On an FTE-based model, which is what this whole industry runs on. If anything, brands should be incenting their agencies to adopt more software platforms, create more automation, and then add machine learning and intelligence on top of it, that theoretically is going to improve performance over what just a bunch of people can do trying to stitch together various platforms. So I definitely don't think it's a brand-driven thing, but I do think that the procurement firms inside of the brands who are hard negotiating the agency contracts and trying to pay their agencies less is what's actually providing that path for agencies to look at it and say, we've got to figure out a way to do things more streamlined in a more productive fashion and hopefully lower our overall labor cost going forward.
Shawn, I've heard you talk about FTE models in the past, and you mentioned just now that the industry continues to operate with them intact. Do you think that there is a ticking timer as far as how long these, this format or this revenue model will continue to exist? Could you put a time on it? And how do you see that playing out?
I don't think that the FTE model is going to go away overnight, nor do I think it's going to completely flip-flop into a pure performance base. What I think we're going to find is contracts that'll exist, which will be a hybrid of the two. In other words, the agency will get paid some form of a fixed cost, more based upon project work. Hey, we're going to spend $100 million for you, and there's going to be some level of just kind of management fee that goes along with that. And then there will probably be incentives baked into performance and how well the overall company does. And I think when you get to that type of a conversation, it's a strategic conversation and a partnership-based conversation where you're both aligned on the same values and goals. It's very similar to the wealth management industry or the investment or private equity banking industry where, I give someone $100 million to manage for me and they get a management fee. But the actual partners in the fund don't actually get their carry or they don't get their profit until they've actually met KPIs and performance targets for the fund. And then once they pass those, they share in the wealth alongside all of the investors. And I think that makes much more of logical sense for where the media and marketing industry is going to go relative to the relationship between the people who are giving the money to the agencies, which are the brands, and then also the people who are managing the media investments. And I think that'll be the playbook and blueprint that gets rolled out over the next, I'll say, 3 to 5, and I'd say if you move probably 7 to 8 years, I think that'll be the norm versus the exception.
So, Shawn, I want to flip the conversation back to the mention of the economy. Obviously, the earlier part of our conversation really focused in on how it's had a dramatic impact on publishers. But I was recently reading a white paper from some of the major holding companies that said that the expectation for 2019 growth across the media business is expected to be between 3 and 4%, as expected for media companies, holding companies, and agencies. Do you see automation in the near future having a dramatic impact on forecasted growth for media agencies and just media buying institutions?
I don't think automation as a moniker is going to have any impact at all on what is being spent in media or specifically paid media. Automation to me means what is really happening with the people who are facilitating all of the transactions that are going on. The big thing I look at is, we have been in the longest bull cycle in the history of our country without a correction or a recession. For anyone to think that that is going to continue is kidding yourself inside of it. So I have an expectation that we'll probably be fine through the year 2019. I think all bets are off when we get to 2020. And if you look at what's happening in the global market, where there's virtually no growth going on right now, there's going to be some serious headwinds facing the overall industry coming into 2020. So I back it up from there, and then I say, we see that we've seen the playbook. We know what the playbook looks like. We understand how this works. Okay, everything's good. Everything's great. Then a recession hits. Now the nice thing for marketers, the bad thing for the overall media industry, is that media is considered a variable cost. It's not a fixed cost. Marketing and advertising is the one dial you can turn up when times are going really well, and you can turn down pretty quickly when you're heading into a headwind or recessionary environment. And then what happens at that point is that agencies will go through what we've always done through. We'll start to reduce headcount, clients will alter contracts, and we'll be firing people left and right, which is just always what happens. My big question is, are we as an industry getting out in front of what we know? And the way to actually make it through a recession is to ahead of time actually figure it out more productive, more efficient, better ways to actually reduce your cost of processing a dollar of media or a dollar of advertising. And so one of my big questions when I sit with decision makers these days is, what have we done to recession-proof our agency? What are the decisions we're making today to get ahead of something like this? Have we implemented the right processes, the frameworks, the protocols, the software in order to be able to withstand a recessionary environment and try to eliminate or actually reduce the need to fire a bunch of our employees or staff members inside of that, inside of the market?
Shawn, are there any other final words or forecasts you want to share with our listeners today as it relates to just the digital media industry and how it's shifting and what we can expect in 2019?
As I think about the next 2, 3, 4, even 5 years out, I think that we are severely underestimating the velocity shift away from a cable provider or a direct TV provider satellite service. There's no question to me that connected televisions or sling boxes, that allow you to actually watch content from your phone to your television, I think that is just going to continue to pick up speed in a really big way. And then once that happens, it becomes truly interesting on who become the winners inside of that environment. Because on one level, you've actually got the content owners, you've got the delivery mechanisms, okay, you've got the actual hardware in which it's seen, you have the video ad serving, content ad serving systems that go into it. You've got the SSPs, and then you've got the DSPs, and then you've got the agencies on the other side. That whole ecosystem of getting ads to the television and who's going to control the data, because I really believe it's going to end up with the owners of the data are going to be in a very leveraged position. And you look at it, the actual Samsung or LG, okay, because they're smart devices, they actually can see the content coming across. Is it going to be Hulu or Netflix or Vudu or any of those companies who are actually providing the content? Is it going to be the ad-serving companies that are actually controlling what ads are being seen inside of it? So to me, the combination and the fight of who's going to control data inside of that is going to be interesting. I think it's going to be incredibly disruptive to the research-based companies that are panel-based today. We're not going to need the panel-based information going forward, so I think it'll be very interesting to watch what happens on the research front. And then for me, on the demand-side platforms or the technology side, it's going to be who can develop some of the best software in order to intelligently place those ads and optimize them across all the various devices, no matter how it's coming in. So I think that the next 5 years relative specifically to television is going to be one of the most fascinating pieces of our industry, not only to watch, but also, frankly, to be front and center and be a part of and really try to develop the right standards to help our brands and help the marketers achieve the success they want in a really efficient means of placing advertising dollars. So to me, that's the thing that I'm most excited about.
I definitely agree that we're headed for a windfall of more disruption for data ownership, research companies, publishers, tech partners, really anyone who's assuming that they have a permanent seat at the advertising table. So, Shawn, thanks so much for making time to talk about digital transformation, the economy, and how they're shaping up the future of our industry.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So that was our very first episode, a conversation with Shawn Riegsecker on digital transformation, the economy, and how they're both dramatically changing so many aspects of the advertising world. Since this was our very first episode, I do want to say a couple things about my hopes for our listenership. Whether you work in digital media, digital advertising, you're on the brand side, you're a marketer, you work on the publisher side, the sell side, whatever the case may be, we're hoping to have unbiased, unpretentious conversation about things that people don't always have time to take a step back and think more about. So our hope is that we're going to have something for everyone and that we're going to share some insightful thoughts to add to your arsenal of learning. So that is it for this particular episode. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen in, and we will catch you next time here on AdTech Unfiltered.